energy consumption and climate impact of AI, which a lot of people aren't thinking about and is phenomenally scary when you talk about it. So if you understand that all tech is there to serve humans, then actually I think the better technologists I've met, some of the best technologists I've met, are not the ones that are deep down head stuck inside a computer. They're the ones that understand that interface between humans and computers.
Data is essentially going to the big tech. So in a way, big tech really owns the AI at this point in time.
the answer of an AI, it's hard to explain. And then the bill which comes when you use these models or when you use cloud, that is also sometimes unexplainable also, because I've seen organizations, they come up with the architecture where they have this huge cloud bills to pay.
The reality is I think it'll be very much like cloud, where we'll be looking back in a few years at some big mistakes that have been made because people rushed in without thinking about what they should be doing.
So everyone, here we are today on an episode of BetterTech. We'll be having a podcast today. The participant of the podcast is I'm Umair, and we have Yasir with us. We both belong to a C-suite of various tech companies. And then we have Joe Baguley with us, and he is CTO of VMware EMEA. Joe, is this correct? Did I introduce you the correct way?
No, that's right. You got it right. Yeah.
Wonderful. So as the typical format is, the conversation can take us anywhere, but we'll keep it conversational. So how about Joe, you take a few minutes and give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Well, how much do you want, really?
As much as you want to give.
Well, so I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer for VMware here in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. VMware recently acquired by Broadcom, so we're now technically VMware by Broadcom, and includes a host of other technologies now that we've taken on board as part of that acquisition. But yeah, I've been at VMware now for, I suppose, nearly 13 years, I suppose. And it's been an interesting journey for us here. Was we sort of taken from the early days when I joined, we were just defining, I was part of the team that was part of the, helped define the concept of the software-defined data center, helped define the concept of, on-premise, private cloud, industrialized at scale, and all the bits and pieces that go along with that, along with dalliances in PaaS with Cloud Foundry and other bits and pieces, around the way. It's been a very interesting 13 years. We could do several podcasts just about that. But yeah, prior to that, various other jobs. We could talk about those if you want.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting background. My team was telling me a fun fact, probably they picked it from you, that you probably went through 23 interviews in a couple of days while you were getting interviewed for VMware. So talk me about that.
Yeah. So joining VMware was a fun thing. Previously, I was at a company called Quest Software. I've been there for 10 years and ended up as the sort of field CTO for Quest Software in EMEA. And what happened was a couple of friends and contacts who were at VMware said, we need to scale our current CTO, who was Steve Herod, very famous man in the world of virtualization, the sort of first visionary CTO for VMware as it was. And they wanted me to scale him in EMEA. And so I was joining a highly technical office of the CTO. The office of the CTO was actually referred to as the office of the island of misfit toys. It was kind of where all the people they didn't know what to do with and a whole bunch of other really clever people hung out and just did clever stuff. And the process of interviewing, because the field CTO role is quite a challenge, because you're interfacing, half my time is with the field as part of field leadership, with the leadership of sales, and the other half is with R&D. So you're really bridging, and you've got to be a sales-focused techie and a techie-focused salesperson that does marketing as well and everything in between. And so I had 23 interviews because I had to essentially, first of all, in Europe, go through a series of interviews with the European sales leadership to make sure I'd fit in with them. And then I was flown over to the US for 2 days, where I was literally grilled back to back with what ended up as being as his famous 23 interviews with various people across the office of the CTO. And including CEO downwards as well, because it's quite a serious hire. And yeah, luckily I got the job, but it was no one else I think of as anyone ever had 23 interviews to get a job before. So I always feel justified in my position. Let's put it that way. I don't feel like I don't deserve to be here. And after 13 years, I think I feel I've earned it.
It shows you
Wonderful.
the recipe.
And as long as they say that you're having a next interview followed by the next interview, followed by the next interview, then you must be doing something right in the previous interview. If that interview is not leading to an exit. So yeah, I think that's a good fun fact. So what is I mean, VMware went through Broadcom acquisition and so on and so forth. So I mean, before we dive into a lot of interesting topics, what is keeping you busy these days?
Wow, what's keeping me busy these days? Well, obviously we've just been through an acquisition, which is exciting as a company. We've been through various similar changes before. First of all, being acquired by EMC, then obviously EMC being acquired by Dell. So in terms of organizational change and you know, a renewed look and focus, we're used to that as an activity, and as a constantly evolving and innovating company, we've never sat still. So, you know, the whole being acquired by Broadcom is just the next phase in VMware's journey that is very bumpy. You don't join VMware and expect to sit still for 20 years. It's not. You don't join any technology company and expect to sit still for 20 years. It's a very highly evolving, highly moving industry. So what am I focused on right now is much more about what's next for VMware and our platform, without going into too much of a sales pitch, which I don't really think people want me to do here. But what is great about the acquisition from my perspective is a renewed focus. That we've got a really good focus. We're sort of, you know, understanding what we're good at, understanding what we can make even better, and focusing much harder on that. So it's a great time. So yeah, actually, what am I doing? Helping internally, our people work out what we should be focusing on to be successful, and then communicating that externally with customers. And it's a very exciting time.
Right. And so Bert told me that besides the VMware stuff, the sports car also keeps you busy, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, it depends what you call a sports car. It's a very interesting. I've got a long history in motorsport, of starting out at rallying at university, believe it or not. It's co-driving late at night around English country lanes in very, very bad student cars, which ended up me ultimately getting my full international rally license and co-driving at an international level, you know, across Europe, which was quite fun. So that was the sort of in the 90s. I did that.
I'm a Formula
kind of in my
1
spare
fan.
time.
I mean, kind of. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's interesting to get into.
I'm a Formula 1 fan. More like a weird, not like actually someone who rides the Formula 1 car, except a few times a couple of simulators, and ended up banging my car everywhere except the road track, keeping it on the road track.
I can bore you to death about Formula 1 too. So we can do that. So I think the interesting journey on that was I also did a lot of driving at the time, and I've been driving on tracks since I was a student too, and I'd had my race license for, you know, since the mid 90s, and dabbled in that bits and pieces as well as doing rallying. And then I've had various track cars over the years. I won't bore people with a list of that, but what excited me was about 2014, I think it was 2014 probably. I was in California, hanging out with a couple of my friends. One of them's a guy called Adrian Cockcroft, who was the sort of man behind Netflix, with the father of microservices, I suppose. Very, very famous for writing the Solaris tuning book with a red Porsche 911 on the front back in the day in the 90s. And he had one of these new Tesla Roadsters, which were very new back in, you know, very cool in the day. And I was hanging around for the weekend. He said, "Do you want to come and have a go in one of these at Laguna Seca Raceway? We're doing an electric car weekend." I went, you know, I'm a petrol head, you know, interesting. I mean, you know. And I got in this car, and within 3 seconds of putting my foot down in it, I was like, okay, fine, I've got to have one of these somehow, or I've got to work out how to drive these, because these are going to change things. So fast forward to now, cut an awful lot of bits out. I now own a couple of Teslas, one of which is a Model 3, which is essentially track prepared. It's got uprated suspension, it's got uprated brakes, it's got a whole bunch of other funky bits and pieces on it. And I now actively take that on track, but I also compete in it in the UK in sprinting and other, I suppose, speed events, as they're called, which is your single timed events, which is the Tesla's really well suited for. But yeah, I've had some great adventures along the way. We went to an event in the southwest of England last year called the Watergate Bay Sprint, where David Richards, who's the chairman of Motorsport UK, ex-world champion rally, all that kind of stuff, and ex-Formula 1, and you name it. And he runs that event, was very excited about what's going on with EVs in the sport. And we actually had an EV of Tesla. I won on Saturday, and another Tesla won on Sunday out of all of the cars. So every car that was there at the event, petrol and electric.
My interaction with these is having, the electric cars so far, having the electric car is having an e-tron GT, and then I'm a Formula One watcher. So I thought that was an interesting way to discuss about you. But talking about you, okay, you have recently hosted a cloud camp over there, and Yasir will be the right person to talk more about it. But help introduce us. What was that? And probably will dig a little deeper about that.
Yeah, so Cloud Camp is something that actually started back in 2008. And back in 2008, there were a bunch of us in California, a guy called Dave Nielsen and some others started up Cloud Camp. And then we copied it blatantly and ran one in London straight afterwards. And it was run by myself, a guy called Simon Wardley, the inventor of Wardley Maps, Chris Swan, and a few others. And Chris Purrington behind us, and we organized this little group. And the group was really, there were so many people at the time out there in the industry talking about cloud that weren't doing it. An awful lot of marketing people mentioning the word cloud, just using cloud whenever they could. What we wanted to do was the same as what happened in the US, was we wanted to get everyone who was actually really doing cloud stuff. And I'm talking, we had, Werner turned up from Amazon and others, to get in a room, a small bunch of us with some pizza, and talk openly and honestly. You left your job titles at the door, you left your sales pitch at the door. We talked about tech, and it was really interesting. It was just a bunch of like-minded people getting together, and that's grown and is now an event we had over 800 people at one of them, but it's settled down to a couple of hundred people that get together now and again. And we had a pause during COVID, and we just started back up again. Where it's very famous. It's a really interesting concept. It's an unconference. It's a series of lightning talks, followed by an unpanel, which you have to go to find out what an unpanel is. If I describe it to you, it ruins it. But the great thing about it is that point is titles are left at the door, company workforce left at the door. It's just you talking about your thoughts, experiences, and understanding about that. And so we have quite a good quorum of people there that have been around in the industry for a long time. And so it felt right. We did one actually a few years ago, the last Cloud Camp back in 2021, 2022, before the whole LLM explosion thing. We had it on AI, and we talked about AI. So we were, having that topic before then. So it's nice to come back and revisit it, which we did the other week. Always fun because we don't prescribe what people should present. It's just tell them something interesting on the topic. You've got 5 minutes. And we had a really cool variety. One of them was about the energy consumption and climate impact of AI, which a lot of people aren't thinking about, and is phenomenally scary when you talk about it. Another talk was about the medical use and impact of AI, and how it's working, how it isn't working, and how Gen AI and other AIs have some application in medicine and don't, and where they're failing, etc. And a whole host of others as well. But the great thing about it, if you ever get to come to Cloud Camp in London, is exactly that. It's beer and pizza. It's sitting in the crypt of a church and just talking tech with no marketing. If anyone does a sales pitch, by the way, everyone in the audience has a red card at Cloud Camp. And if someone holds up a red card while someone's speaking, we will question and say, okay, if this is a sales pitch, and we'll stop them, kick them off the stage. It's happened.
Right. No, this is interesting that you mentioned, because I think the environmental impact, and we'll talk about more about this the whole AI explosion, and prior to that, even the this blockchain thing. I think the amount of energy we are using to make this happen is actually quite a bit, and it has a lot of impact. And no wonder Nvidia's shares are through the roof. But yeah, there is an impact out of that. So Yasir, if you have any question, you can jump in here.
Yeah. So that actually is an interesting dimension. I never thought about this before this talk. So, but it's always, for example, large language models and blockchain and all of these technologies. These are very computing hungry kind of things. And you mentioned 2008, and I think that's when the cloud was. We have come a long way in last these, I think, 16 years. You're talking about.
Yeah.
So 2008 cloud will be very, very primitive compared to the cloud that we have right now. And the capabilities we have, computing capabilities, because of which LLMs are possible. They are only because of the cloud thing that we have. So in your camps, you talk about AI and then LLM also. LLM is comparatively newer thing than the larger AI. How do you think? What is the impact? Are people using it very frequently? What is the penetration in your view? And will it be a threat in near future? Or What kind
Cool.
of
That's a big topic. I've got a big presentation I give on that. But to précis it for you, you're looking at a few things. You're looking at LLMs as a whole. They're advancing at a rapid pace. I mean, there's daily news on advances on what LLMs can do. They still have various limitations. There's still limitations around hallucination. We still have to understand what the training data that went into them and the bias that's in that training data and other things. But we are starting to see them certainly pop up at scale in our customer base. Initially, some off-the-shelf products, like a lot of people using Microsoft Copilot and GitHub Copilot and other things to help them coding and just writing emails and things like that. But we're starting to see people looking at more and more use cases of how they can do that. The allied thing we're seeing mainly is around the concerns that people have for the data that they're playing with these LLMs with. Because if you're using a big public LLM, some online cloud-based LLM, and you're pumping huge amounts of data to ask a question about, a lot of people have concerns about, hang on a second, where's that data going? If I'm feeding it all of my contracts, where is that going to sit? Does it temporarily hold them? Does it learn from them and then they're embedded in there somehow and you'll never get them out? So a lot of that needs to be fleshed out at the moment in the industry. It's a big challenge. And so we're seeing also a big rise in private AI. So if you want to see where I think LLMs are going to go as an industry, we can look at cloud as a very useful model for that, where we originally said, oh, there's going to be 2 or 3 big clouds, and that's it. And everyone's just going to use those 2 or 3 big clouds. When the reality we sit in our customer base from a cloud perspective is that, yes, customers are using public cloud. Most customers are using some form of public cloud, either as a SaaS or as IaaS. No problem, but they're also using private cloud for various reasons around sovereignty, speed, whatever it is. They realize that private cloud has its place too. We're seeing that around LLMs as well, and around just general AI, where people are saying, okay, I'm going to use public AI for certain cases, but there's going to be scenarios where I want to use private AI. I want to have my data guaranteed to be local, guaranteed to not go anywhere, secure, etc. So there's a very burgeoning market around that architecture for where LLMs are going to be deployed. And then you get into another question, because the expensive bit about LLMs is actually training the models. And that's where all the, a lot of the effort goes in, and the energy consumption is in training those models in the first place. And so it's very expensive in terms of both, kit and energy to train a model. So only some very, very large enterprises could even think about that. So other enterprises are like, well, where do I get my models from? And how are those models trained? And what's embedded in those models? And, how do I know what those models can do? So there's a whole questions around the explainability of AI and other things as well in that space. So, and we can get into the law piece, the IP piece, and other bits and pieces as well. But I think the point is, there's people looking at AI. They're using it for some very cool things. One of the ones that sort of comes left field, people don't think about, is we're seeing customers really interested in using AI to deal with legacy code. So what I'm talking about is point it at a mainframe and go, what does all this COBOL do? And can you rewrite it in something better? Or can you somehow, change it, update it, whatever? It just help me work out what the hell's going on with it. We're seeing a lot of that. So that way of you're modernizing legacy. So that's interesting. But equally, we're seeing a lot of concern, a lot of hesitancy to use it at scale for various reasons we just discussed.
So what kind of challenges do you see organizations are facing? For example, if they go with this hybrid cloud kind of thing, where they have their local LLM thing and they're using some public thing. So it's a complex architecture. There'll be lots of traps around for performance and security. So do you think the industry is at the stage where people can handle all of these things, and the computing power and all of the infrastructures at the stage where we can handle all of this thing?
I think most organizations I talk to are struggling to run a private public cloud infrastructure before they've even thought about running a private public LLM infrastructure, or architecture. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that if you look at it from a cloud perspective, a lot of people want to play about too much with what they do on premises. They're very happy to go off premises and buy a service. So, go to Amazon, I'll just rent some machines and that's what I do. But then they somehow seem to think that when they come to on premises, rather than just going and getting a cloud platform like, VMware Cloud Foundation and just running it, they go, actually, no, I want to tune that bit and pick that bit apart. And I want to have my storage doing this and whatever, because they seem to think that's something they should waste time doing. Whereas actually what they should be doing is just running the platform and focusing on the differentiation for them, which sits on top of that platform. The same applies to when you talk about LLMs. So when we think about LLMs, you've got to go, well, hang on a second. Where's the differentiation in here? Do we as an organization differentiate by training models better? Or do we differentiate by, providing data those models better, or using it? How is it we differentiate? And I think a lot of that cycle's got to go through first before people start to decide where they're best going to use an LLM. What we've got to be careful of is where data is going to sit, and people putting an awful lot of data into something public that they're then going to regret, or spending an awful lot of time building something on premises when they didn't need to because of the circumstances around the data involved. That meant they could use public. So there's a whole bunch of uncertainty in the space. When I'm talking to customers, they're literally feeling their way in the dark at the moment about what they should be doing.
Yeah.
The other challenge you've got is everyone you talk to, every consultancy right now apparently suddenly is an expert in LLMs. They're prompt engineers and all this other kind of thing has suddenly popped up. So there's an awful lot of people out there that will tell you they know what to do. The reality is, I think it'll be very much like cloud, where we'll be looking back in a few years at some big mistakes that have been made because people rushed in without thinking about what they should be doing.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed is that people are actually thinking that LLMs are going to give you facts, essentially without realizing that they're a generative part of the AI, and they're not giving you facts. So that's where they can hallucinate. So another thing that probably when you say that people are inputting data is just probably right now through the inputting of context. And that data is essentially going to the big tech. So in a way, big tech really owns the AI at this point in time. Do you kind of agree with this fact or not? And can ever the smaller companies or someone, ordinary businesses can work with the AI without involving big tech, so to say?
Well, you can. So I think we will see more and more cloud providers spinning up their own LLMs for people to use, whether in a sovereign context or just a secure context in other ways. The big money for big tech is obviously them investing in training the models, and that's really it. So whereas there's increasingly better public models available, you go to Hugging Face and others and can download a whole series of really high quality models, and they're getting better and better every time. So the models you're downloading from there are already pretty good compared to the very latest stuff you're going to get from Gemini or Claudia or whatever it is. So I think the arms race there isn't quite so separated as it used to be. So I think the potential is there for organizations to run their own models. I think the challenge is what those models are, where they've been trained, what data they're using. And there's a huge growth in this ability to take a model and then have it not actually ingest data, but sit on the side with vector databases, RAG and all that kind of stuff, where people say, okay, well, I'm actually not going to use it. It's going to be there as a sidecar almost. So I don't think there's a real limitation for smaller organizations. Yeah, but okay, tiny organizations, yeah, of course, you're just going to sign up to ChatGPT or whatever it is and use that. But small to medium-sized enterprises, very much so, will be running their own LLMs. I mean, we're going to be running our own LLMs on our own phones very, very soon. So there's no reason why large organizations can't do that. But you made a good point about the facts piece. Is that I think I always liken LLMs to Wikipedia. And the Wikipedia, when it first came out, people thought was transformative. It's going to contain all human knowledge. It's going to change how we do education. It's going to change everything. It's going to be the ultimate place to look everything up. And a lot of people got very excited. And then at the end of it, we sat down and went, well, yeah, it's pretty good for some stuff, but now we know its limitations. We know how to use it. It's still used in an educational context, but it hasn't replaced everything. I think you're going to see that very much with LLMs. People will realize their limitations. They'll understand what they can do with them, what they can't do with them, what they're good at, what they're bad at. People are getting better as well. The LLMs are getting better. But the fundamental problem you have right now, which is really interesting, actually, because this is getting really, really nuanced, is the concept of understanding. The LLMs currently, because they talk English to you, people assume they understand when they very clearly don't, right? People are sort of, anthropomorphize them, and they put some kind of human-like feeling to them because they think this is the real deal. When in fact they don't understand anything. What they're doing is just predicting words, right? They're predicting what would be the next word in the context.
The next character or next word.
Correct. Yeah, it's basically predicting tokens. So. My favorite example is one of the I think it's 3.5 when they got some medical questionnaire, get it to a medical diagnosis. It did the medical diagnosis, and at the end of the medical diagnosis, it cited 2 medical papers. Those medical papers didn't exist. It just made them up, but it knew that when you come up with a medical diagnosis, it has these words at the end that are the medical paper. And the people who wrote them had written some medical papers. That was credible. They hadn't written these ones because they didn't exist. They then asked them what the medical papers were, so it just made them up. That's a lack of understanding to me, where people, these things don't know what they're doing. However, really interesting, there's the latest version of the latest LLM actually managed to spot that it was being tested. So one of the tests we now do with LLMs is a thing called needle in the haystack, where we'll give it a whole bunch of data and we'll put a piece of out of context data in there, essentially, short way to do that, and then at some point in the future ask it to recall that piece of out of context data. This one said, okay, yes, I found this piece of out of context data, and I believe it was put there to test me.
Wow.
Which was really interesting, because it's like, hang on a second. So there's some interesting stuff going on with these models, but that's the other problem. We don't know what's going on inside them, right? Yeah. We don't know how these models are. What they
one of the things that we and the engineers are call them broking, that sometimes, I mean, they certainly solve a certain problem which they can, I mean, you cannot predict how they're solving it, really. So I mean, there's a lot of facts around that that we talk to us a little bit more. Why don't we know what is going inside the LLM? What will it take from statistical, mathematical point of view to really get there and figure out what goes inside them?
Well, they're non-deterministic, right? So a deterministic system says that, you know, if I put in 2 + 2, it comes out as 4 every time. The challenge we have with LLMs at the moment is they aren't. There's been work for many years around machine learning, around the explainability of AI. And the explainability of AI has been driven by a bunch of factors, really around, you know, using it in systems, determinism, and all that kind of stuff. But it actually comes down to a much more interesting test for me, is the one where if AI is had to have made a decision that had an outcome that affected something, and that something ends up in court, you'll have to stand there and prove how the AI made that decision. And at the moment, most people can't. There's lots of work being done on explainability of AI, but especially in the context of LLMs, et cetera, and large machine learning models, we really don't know and can't explain, certainly not to the point where we'd be able to legally prove that it would or wouldn't do something. And so there's an awful lot of research going on in the industry around that at the moment too, which I think will be a never-ending game. And so the question I always ask people when they get overexcited about AI, and go, oh, AI is fantastic, it's going to change the world, it's going to be brilliant, we're going to be, the whole thing's going to be fantastic. Okay, right, you're up in court for a crime you didn't commit. Do you want to be judged by an AI or by a bunch of humans?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the trolley problem question for today, right?
Right. So I was looking at this Andrew Ng talk or course, and said you should think of the current LLMs like a fresh college graduate, and that you get every time a new graduate. So what you can expect out of them, you can expect out of this. So Yasir, you want to say something? Sorry about
because we have used this term explainability so many times. I was thinking that there are multiple dimensions in which we cannot explain things. For example, the answer of an AI, it's hard to explain, and then the bill which comes when you use these models or when you use cloud, that is also sometimes unexplainable also, because I've seen organizations, they come up with the architecture where they have this huge cloud bills to pay, and then they have to revisit multiple times their architectures and solutions to make it feasible for them. So I know, I mean, only training of architects, but I mean, when our young solution architects, they come up with cloud-based solutions, they always run into this problem that they are unaware of the fact that cloud is expensive, and these LLM models are also they tend to be expensive.
They're incredibly expensive. They're incredibly expensive, and I think people don't realize that. And a lot of the conversations we're having with people about cloud right now is where they've for some reason, you know, selected a cloud first policy, where they've gone, okay, we're going to be cloud first. Everything we're going to do from now on is going to be in the cloud, but you got to put it in the cloud first, or without actually and that to me is the wrong way to do things, right? It's putting the technology before the problem. You're going, okay, well, the answer is going to be cloud, right? Let's find everything we've got and work out how we can answer it with cloud, which doesn't make sense to me. That's like saying the answer to everything in 1996 is to put it on compact hardware, right? And then going around trying to work out how you get everything to run on compact hardware, when you might find that's not the right answer for you. And so actually what we need to be doing is understanding that really cloud technologies form part of the options we now have for solving problems. They're not the answer to solving all problems. They're just one of the other answers we've got. So some of it's on premises, some of it's at edge, some of it's in the cloud. So someone's architecture, whatever you want to call that, or operating model as I prefer, will involve, okay, I'm going to have workloads that run in cloud. I'm going to have workloads that run in whatever you want to call private cloud, whether that's individual data centers or, things in my retail stores, and then we'll go down to we're going to have stuff running at the edge as well. I need to have a data strategy that understands that I'm going to be putting data in all those places. I need to have an AI strategy that knows I'm probably going to be executing AI and LLMs both in the public cloud, in the edge, and in private cloud. So I think, frankly, it's incredibly naive for any size enterprise to suddenly think they're going to be all in one place, because you'll never get there. We come across time and time again large organizations that are going, oh, we're all in on Cloud X, and then you go and look at them and they're sort of, how did that go for you? Well, we're about 5 years in. We've got about 8% of our workloads there now, and we've kind of slowed down on it, really. So you're not seeing huge repatriation. I mean, we're seeing pockets of it. I can go and find you repatriation examples. I can go and find you points where people have gone, okay, fine, we pulled that out. But in reality, there's not some huge back out of cloud. What there is actually, there's a big sort of slowdown and stop in mass adoption and migration to cloud. And there's a rethink, thankfully, where people are going, well, yeah, maybe we should think a bit more intelligently about where these things sit. And that's driven, very much, as you say, by cost. A lot of it is expensive. Storage is the most unbelievable, and everyone talks about storage in the cloud is the most expensive thing. And so when you think about what we're going to be doing going forward with more and more data, more AI, more etc., why is it going to be cheaper in the cloud when it's even more storage, and more networking and more everything else? So actually, the reality that we're seeing in the cloud is people having a much more pragmatic, intelligent view of it, not putting everything as being cloud first. And that's, I think the right way to do it, because it's frankly arrogant, to someone to think that one particular cloud provider is going to solve every single one of their IT problems today, but also have the somehow vision and foresight to say that in 5 years' time, this same cloud provider is going to provide everything I need to run my business. You're mad. Honestly, I think you're mad. So you've got to be a little bit more intelligent than that.
Great. So, Joe, one thing I would like to ask that, so people are excited. What I've observed that people are excited about AI. They don't know where to start. And right now, we are in the awareness phase of that. So every now and then, what we see as a news is the next kind of frontier or the beginning of the use case that AI has just created. I mean, now you can use text to video, you can text to gaming, and so on and so forth. So people are excited about that. So I mean, these are all, as I say, would be a good clickbait for when you want someone to read your article. But where have you seen in your experience so far, one, successful implementation of AI, if you've seen any, in the large enterprises as well as in the smaller companies, which function and what kind of use cases? And also, since we have covered some distance in the cloud age, what you think are now the right use cases for cloud, even cloud migration for companies? You mentioned that the bills are astronomical, people are rethinking, but we have been in this cloud era for about 20 years now. So what are the right use cases for cloud that are really past the test of time? And where have you seen the early adoption in the AI ML space in terms of use cases, the functions, and so on?
And so I just sort of mentioned earlier on the main areas where I'm seeing some of the early adoption around AI and machine learning, specifically LLMs, machine learning within organizations, is exactly around the I suppose the from a language perspective, it's in coding, it's in the Copilot stuff, all the things you'd expect. That's where we're seeing all the usage right now. What we're starting to see is an exploration of people where they're looking at how they can do sorting out of their data to use it a bit more intelligently. And that's the challenge. So a lot of people seem to think they're going to get some LLM. So you can go out and use these public LLM tools, and a lot of people are doing that. Where you start to say, how do I apply it to enterprise? A lot of people are thinking, well, I've just got this for some years, I've been building a data lake, because a data lake was what I was told to build. So I've just been chucking all my data in here. Most of it's unstructured. It's a complete mess. I've got a collection of weird databases. I'm not quite sure what they are. And somehow they think they're going to throw an LLM at it and it's going to magically make their world fantastic, which it isn't, because what a lot of people are now realizing that actually you need to get your data in order for LLMs to be able to make sense of it, to be able to use it, to tag it correctly, to be able to do human in the loop training correctly, to get it to actually, educate itself wisely on that data. And so, there's another phase, I think, coming where we'll have LLMs should be able to help, or generative AI or some form of AI will enable us to help sort data out better. But at the moment, we have a real problem with the data that we have. Most enterprises have, just is in the wrong places, it's the wrong type, it's stored in the wrong way, it's not categorized right, it's not been tagged correctly. there's some cool things you can do. I've seen some great projects around legal contracts where people are going, okay, well, let's import every legal contract we've written for the last 20 years and now have that as something that can help us create new and better legal contracts with our customers going forwards. There's some really cool stuff around that. And I think you're seeing pockets within organizations where you get visionaries that realize they can change the way that they do work. And I think that's really the key when you look at these AI and LLMs, is to understand, how are you going to use this to augment what you do and make it better and faster? How do you get it to get rid of drudge work? And if you look at what people are using them for today, the co-pilots, all the stuff, people are using it to get rid of drudge work. Write this email, generate this code, it's and then I'll tweak it. So it's okay. Well, what other roles within an organization is there where something has to be generated drudge work, which then other people can then do their final 10% of tweaking on, for example. And that's the converting old code's a great one. Convert this code, and I'll then spend a tenth of the time I would have done actually getting it to work, rather than just doing the bulk conversion stuff. So we're seeing a lot of that initially as people start to look at these things.
So it's interesting that you mentioned about the coding stuff. So NVIDIA CEO, he says that in the next 4 or 5 years, the programmers will be extinct as we know them. And
I agree.
You agree with that?
Yeah. So I think if you look at programming languages, what are programming languages? Programming languages are a way to get a computer to do what you want.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the very first early days of programming machine code, right? And one of my first jobs as an intern was doing machine code, right? To languages have got better and better and better and easier, because what they're doing is they're enabling more and more humans to have access to be able to code, to make computers do what they want. So if you now look at it as what's an LLM, well, an LLM is the next generation programming language. Actually, so think about an LLM as a programming language. Don't think about it as anything else. So an LLM is a way for me to get computers to do what I want. So now I can talk to LLMs in English. Now, There's a load of stuff going on around prompt engineering at the moment. That will be a very short-lived cycle. These LLMs will get better and better. There's already LLMs used to create prompts right now. So you can use an LLM to drive another LLM, right? No, they already exist. There's a series of companies doing that and tools on the web that do that. So very, very quickly, you're going to get to the point now that we've got, and when you think about the bigger picture, which is AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is, that big thing. This is, what we're doing with LLMs is we're doing the interface bit. We're doing the language bit. We're doing the talk to and get computers to do what I want bit. What the computers then think they should be doing and everything else is the complicated bit, the understanding, all that kind of thing. The big difference now, actually, by the way, is that with LLMs, we now see a path to AGI, which we didn't have maybe 2 years ago. But so in the context of, programming, I'm very excited about the fact I told people many years ago, and when people say, what should I be doing if I want to get my kids involved in computers? And it's just I teach them the code. I'm like, no, don't, because there's a very small number of people in our industry that actually code, and it's going to get smaller and smaller because you're going to just talk to computers and tell them what you want them to do. And there will be people that do coding, but there'll be fewer and fewer and fewer because they're the people that create the stuff that makes everyone then have access to control computers. So that's it. Yeah. Conversational programming. Think about it, right? That's exactly where we're getting to. We're nearly there already with LLMs. So yeah, you won't need programmers.
I think that will be the time when our customers will understand the importance of right requirements. So if we get the right requirements only, then LLMs will be able to give you the right answers, right?
I think but this is all about, Umair mentioned it, the word context is very important. The more trained the LLMs become, the wider the data set they have, the better the understanding they have of your business, the better the understanding of how you operate, the more context they have about how you do things, the better they're going to be able to essentially do what you want them to do. But yeah, I think totally, I'm getting very excited about the fact that I will be able to code by talking to a computer. Already can.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, eventually, the holy grail would be to take LLM to a stage where they can be your CDOs, so to say. But the next generation of people going into the universities or undergrad programs today, what should they learn? I mean, that's the question that intrigues me.
This is really interesting for me, and this is what I think about a lot, right? And I've got kids who have just graduated.
My kids are now getting into the college stage, and they ask me, "What should I learn?" I said, "Look, I've done business. I know tech. I don't know. I really don't know." I mean, what do you think about that?
No, this is I've got a very particular view on this. Right. So the reason we put all this technology together is to support and augment humans. Okay. So all technology exists to make humans better at doing what they're doing, whether it's, a machine that helps you drive because it get you from A to B much, much faster rather than walking. That's using technology to augment us and replace our legs, or whatever it is. So if you understand that all tech is there to serve humans, then actually I think the better technologists I've met, some of the best technologists I've met, are not the ones that are deep down head stuck inside a computer. They're the ones that understand that interface between humans and computers, and the ones that understand that we exist here to build these technologies for not for their own sake, but for other humans. And so what I would encourage someone now who is going to study and wants to work in tech to study would be to very much, whatever it is you're studying, make sure there's psychology involved in that. Make sure there's an understanding of the human psyche. Make sure you can interact, empathize, understand what's going on, because AI is the next evolution in replacing human functionality. So the first one we had was where we replaced human muscles. Okay, so whether we replaced them first off with animals, we got horses and oxen to do all the work, and we rode around on them, and elephants, etc. And then we found machinery and found better ways to capture energy, and so now we do that. But that's still replacing our muscles. Once we replaced our muscles, then it wasn't the biggest person in the village that was in charge anymore. It was the cleverest person in the village that was in charge, who understood best how to use all that technology to win. And that's the era we've been living in for thousands of years since we started doing that. It's in the last 80, 100 years since computers started to pop up, really, I suppose, that we have started to realize that now the computers are augmenting our brains. So now we've augmented our muscles with technology. So now it's not necessarily the person who can think best, because we can get computers to do a lot of the thinking for us. So then you go, okay, well, what's left that makes you human? And what's left that makes you human is the sort of emotional side of things. It's the, it's, as I suppose, without being too prosaic about it, we've spent millions of, hundreds of thousands of years, and we still can't define what love is, for example, right? So, there's an awful lot going on there in that context. So I think it's maybe the way I, for many years, sort of summarized this is, if I am sick, I very much want a computer to diagnose me. I very much want a computer to be doing all the stuff around that, but I still like a human there to hold my hand and guide me through it. Right. And so I think, as you look at that and think about that going forward, you need to think about that progression in where we use technology to augment human activity, where that's going to take us, and what, AI and LLMs is just the next phase in the brain piece of that. So what happens next? That's exciting.
So Joe, so what you have just said, that I think very exciting in many ways, and kind of thought-provoking as well. So first, we outsource our muscles, kind of, but the stronger machines we can still kind of control with our brains. Then we kind of outsource the computational power, calculators or computers, so to say. Now we are kind of outsourcing, and eventually the
decision making.
Eventually the kids who get used to calculators at the very early stage, their mathematical brain, I've seen them struggle a bit. And now we are even kind of outsourcing our decision making, leaving emotions to us. Will it create kind of lesser and lesser kind of intelligent humans down this down the road or not?
I'm not sure. I think that's a really, really deep ethical question that I've not got an answer to. We've all got Wall-E in our heads, right? The fat people floating around eating pizza. So I kind of, I get that. I think if you look at us as humans, we've used technology over the time to create a better quality of life for us, where on a whole, as a human race, we have more leisure time. In a developed world, we're not spending so much time, doing rough mechanical manual work. We're out there, we're spending more time sitting around and enjoying ourselves and having. So I think ultimately, maybe we will get to the point where all the machines are doing all the work for us, and we're not actually have to do any real work or decision making or anything like that. That would be quite an interesting. There's a whole sci-fi series of that you can sit and write there, I think. But honestly, I don't know. It's not going to happen in my lifetime.
So one article I read and said that with AI you can eventually get a 3-day work week. You just
Oh
mentioned
yeah,
that.
totally. I agree with that too. I think we will get to the point where there's a 3-day work week. But I think again, you then look at what. So this is really interesting for me because I've got my eldest daughter actually works in the service industry. She runs a Michelin-starred restaurant, and the fun thing about that is they're busier than they've ever been. And people, you want to look at this. A slight diversion here, but people always complain about the high street. Oh, look at the high street. It's changing. The internet's destroying my high street. No, the internet's just changed the high street. What happens now is you go to the high street to get stuff you can't get delivered to your house or order on the internet, right? You can't get your nails done over the internet. You can't get your hair done over the internet. You can't sit with some friends over a coffee over the internet. You can't go out for a nice dinner and experience some amazing food and, with some friends cooked by someone special over the internet. So you're seeing a switch much more to actually, rather than those town centers and those high streets being somewhere where it's an exchange of goods, it's now an exchange of services, an exchange of emotions and human interaction. And so they're returning more to that village center than they ever were before. And you'll see communities built probably a bit better around that. So I think it's quite nice that actually we're switching. So all the, the bits and pieces we get delivered by Amazon to our houses all our day, so what? But it's probably better that we don't need someone to sit in a shop and move them around. That's more efficient. But we can focus on it. So it's a nice corollary for what could go on at a larger scale.
Right. Yasir, you have any things?
No, I think it was a great talking to you, Joe. So
no worries.
So wonderful. I guess the last 15, 20 minutes turned out to be much more exciting. At least for me, it does. Well, probably we should have another podcast around that we will talk about how eventually the effects of AI on the human race.
We should.
Yeah.
We should do. It's a really fascinating discussion. It's one that I always get asked by people all the time because I often get, will it take my job? The answer is probably yes. You'll have to find a different one, but that's always happened to humans. We've always had our jobs taken away by technology. My favorite one in that is there used to be people in London called knocker-uppers. All right. And a knocker-upper was someone who used to go around with a stick and bang on your window in the morning to wake you up before the invention of alarm clocks.
Right.
So do we complain about the fact there's no knocker-uppers anymore and the knocker-uppers union is upset? I don't think so. We moved on to something else, right? Yeah.
I think as long as the humans find a way to remain computationally and intelligently ahead of other stuff, I think we are covered and we can use these machines for our benefit.
Correct. Use them to augment us, not replace.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for being with us. I think we have really enjoyed talking to you, and I look forward to another session with you talking about this machine and human interface and path down. Thank you very much.
That would be cool. Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.